I'm just on my way to Bangkok from Hat Yai Airport with my daughter. She was born with a condition with her feet, and we've been seeing a doctor in Bangkok for years. And it started off, we were going out every 2 weeks, every month, and now it's just once a year. So I haven't been to Bangkok for a year, so I'm quite looking forward to it. Hat Yai Airport is very quiet. There are no Malaysian and Singaporean tourists as there usually are, but the Thais have started travelling again. So there's domestic flights. There's a few people here, but it's relatively quiet. The difference this year is COVID. If you're flying domestically in Thailand, you need to be vaccinated, and there are different requirements for each province. So depending on the type of vaccine you've had, some provinces might say 2 injections, some might say 1, and if you haven't had the vaccine, you need to be tested. So we went to have our test this morning and all was fine. When we used to travel to Bangkok frequently, I always used Nok Air, and it seems that they remembered me. Even though we haven't flown for a year, when I checked in this morning, the check-in girl remembered me and my daughter, remarked on how she had grown up. And I didn't pre-reserve a seat, that cost money. And I just asked for if they had a seat at the front, and she gave me a premium seat for free. So I think loyalty does pay off, and I'm really impressed with Nok Air. Thais are terrified of COVID. A lot of the passengers boarding the plane were wearing 2 or 3 masks, and in addition, perspex visors in front of their faces. Seen a single other Farang at Don Mueang Airport today, which is very strange. And for the first time, I didn't have to wait at all for a taxi. I just came straight out, and there were loads of taxis waiting and no passengers. As usual, the taxi driver license in the cab, the picture on it looks nothing like the driver. This one's called Somchai. The driver, whatever his name is, has just told me that there hasn't been any rain recently, which is good because it's been really wet down south, heavy rain every day. And the other thing about the taxi drivers, they will always try to encourage you to agree to go on the expressway. That's a lane above. That's because it's a lot more convenient and faster for them, but you have to pay. And today the traffic really doesn't look that bad, so I just told him not to worry and just to go on the regular road, so I won't have to pay any toll fees. This is the lightest traffic that I've ever known in Bangkok. When we were leaving the airport and the driver was trying to persuade me to go on the expressway, I asked him in Thai if there were traffic jams. Oh yeah, he said, we're trying to make me go on the expressway. It's just one of those unfortunate things about Thailand, that people will lie to you continually or try to rip you off. And on this trip, there's a few places I plan to go to. It's quite touristy, and I'm expecting some scammers to approach me and try and rip me off. So we'll just see what happens. I've now checked into my hotel. This is the Novotel Bangkok Silom. And this is the view from my room. The weirdness continues. Normally when you stay in a hotel in Thailand and come down for breakfast at 8 a.m, it's crowded. There are dozens of people all fighting over the breakfast buffet. And today, this is the end of November, which is the high season in Thailand. And I guess this is quite a popular hotel, and there's one other guest. And this is the buffet section, but it's closed because there's not enough people. So you have to order everything through the waitress. And it's just totally weird. And the first time I came to Thailand was 34 years ago. I've stayed in dozens of Thai hotels and just never experienced anything like this. And looking at the news yesterday, there's now panic over the Omicron variant of COVID. So just as they're about to start opening up the tourist industry again in Thailand, no doubt it will all be closed down again because of this new COVID scare. It's crazy. Travelling by tuk-tuk is good fun, but if you're a foreigner, they just try to rip you off. So we're going to the Grand Palace, and this guy saw me waiting on the road for a taxi, so I pulled over. I wanted to know where I was going, so I said Grand Palace, and he gave me a price of 200, which is crazy. So I said no, I'll get a taxi. So I had to walk away. The price went down to 150. I said no again, and the price went down to 100. So I'm paying him 100 baht. And it may be a bit more expensive than a taxi, but these things are quite good fun, so 100 baht's okay. We're in the Chinatown area at the moment, and the taxi driver is actually quite a nice guy. He's pointed out some things of interest, and it's tough for these guys, you know, they've got to earn a living, and they earn so little that it's understandable that they bump up the fares for foreigners. And I appreciate that, but I just don't like being ripped off. This is the entrance to Wat Pragao, better known as the Grand Palace. We've just been through a little COVID checkpoint, and I believe this is only recently reopened after being closed for COVID. Very few people, and there's very few of the scammers that wait outside telling you that this place is closed, but they can take you to a gem shop that's got a special promotion on today. But there are a lot of people offering English language tours outside and charging like 600 baht like for a 45-minute tour, which sounds a bit expensive, so I think we'll just forego their services and take a look by ourselves. This is the ticket office, and I knew what was going to happen, but I'll just explain. So the bits in English will say you've got to pay, give you a time, visiting time and ticket time, and tell you it's 500 baht per person. But this little bit in the corner says Kon Thai, Khao Chom free, so Thai people can enter for free. So it's just foreigners that fund this place. And interestingly, I'm with my daughter, who's half Thai and half English, and the lady here asked immediately if she was Thai. She sort of knew that she was Thai, which she is, so she doesn't have to pay. So I just had to pay 500 baht, but that's fine. It's a beautiful place, and it must cost a lot for its upkeep. So I'm quite happy to pay. And I haven't been here for many years, so I'm quite looking forward to visiting again. And it'll be nice to visit when there's so few people. The lady said that entrance is free if you have a Thai ID, and I do have a Thai ID, but it's a pink card, and she told me that only blue ones are allowed. And she was very nice, and she was very apologetic and said it's that she doesn't make the rules, she just enforces them. But it's fine, and this place is so fantastic that it's actually quite worth 500 baht. I'm really looking forward to today's visit. When I've been before, there's just been crowds of people, and today there's virtually no one, and that's really added to it. I also suspect the Thais are really enjoying seeing important buildings in their own country without throngs of tourists around. Because it's so long since I've been here, I'd actually forgotten how fantastic it is. It's a perfect day today. It's not too hot, it's not raining. There are beautiful blue skies which provide a fantastic background for the golden temples. And so no crowds of people. And just like Ayutthaya, a lot of the Thais that visit here wear their traditional clothing. And that's really nice to see as well. What a fantastic place. The sad thing is that when I mentioned this to my daughter, she wasn't particularly interested. And the same thing with my wife. When my wife is in Bangkok, she just wants to go to shopping malls and not really interested in places like this. And I just can't really understand that mentality. If she did come, she'd want to come to do merit making, tambun. That's important to her, but I don't think she really appreciates the beauty of the buildings here. Strange. I don't know a great deal about history, but Ayutthaya fell in 1767 when the Burmese sacked the city, and then in 1768 Thaksin began a new capital in Thonburi. His palace was just next door to Wat Arun, the Temple of Dawn. He lasted a few years before they executed him, and they started building this place in 1782. And at the time, I believe there was quite a big Chinese population living in Bangkok in this area. And because the Thais wanted this area for the new royal palace, they moved them to where they are now, in the Chinatown area, Yaowarat. And then this palace was occupied by Thai royalty up until I believe 1925. Lots of the statues here glitter in the sunshine, and I believe that glitter is porcelain that hundreds of years ago was used as ballast in the ships that plied trade between Thailand and China. So if there weren't many goods on board, they would fill up the hull with porcelain as ballast, and that eventually made its way into Thailand's temples. The inside isn't quite as spectacular as the outside. There are lots of beautiful and very intricate murals that have been drawn on the walls. I think they depict various stages of the Buddha's life. Yeah, as I said before, it's so long since I've been here that I'd forgotten how beautiful it is. Fantastic place. This wall is huge, and if you just look at how much detail there is in one figure, you can see that an enormous amount of man-hours has gone into painting this mural. There's some writing at the bottom which I think is the artist's name and date. So it's Nai Arin, it was Mr. Arin who did it, and the date is 2474 in Thai, and I think that's 1931 in the Western calendar. So the original was painted in 1931, and there's more information below, and I think this has to do with the restoration. So I'm not quite sure the pronunciation, but the person that restored it will be Nai Sakmuan, and it's restored in the Thai year 2516, which I think is 1973. So originally painted in 1931 and then restored in 1973. Prakao Morakot. This is the temple of the Emerald Buddha. I was just distracted there, the security guard was talking to me. Yeah, Prakao Morakot. the Temple of the Emerald Buddha. This is, I believe, the holiest place in Thailand. It's a fantastically ornate, beautiful building, and the small Emerald Buddha is dressed by the king at the beginning of every change of season. And I don't think we're actually allowed to photograph the Emerald Buddha, but we can photograph or video some of the building. I think we'll make our way inside to take a look. There's a sign just inside that says photography and video prohibited. Be quiet and do not point your feet to the Buddha. And there's another sign here that says group photos are not allowed here. So while we take a look inside, I just think I'll have to turn the camera off for a few minutes. The inside is absolutely spectacular. I just had a chat with the security guard inside. Although you can't take photos or do videos inside the building, he said you can stand here and take a video or photo. I haven't got much of a zoom lens on this camera, but you can probably see the inside a little bit. And he also pointed out that although it's called monocot, which translates to emerald, the statue is actually made of jade, not emerald. I've talked about merit making before in one of my videos, and because I'm not Buddhist, not Thai, I don't feel that comfortable doing it. My wife always does it and the kids follow, but on this visit the wife's not here, but I want my daughters to do it because I think it's quite important. So this is where you get the things that are the merit making. It's the incense sticks, the candles and the lotus flowers, and you don't pay. There's a donation box. And this business about foreigners paying and Thais not paying, well, one of my Thai friends, his theory is that it's because foreigners don't donate. Well, today I paid an entrance fee and donated. There's a huge Chinese influence in Thailand. I've been reading quite a lot recently about Thai history, and sort of 400 years ago, back in the early days, there were lots of Chinese, and there still are. Prat Jedi Tong. So a jedi is this structure and tong is gold. There's so much here and everything is so beautifully decorated. It really is a photographer and videographer's dream. And we've got a fantastic day for it today as well. Look at the colours of that roof against a perfectly blue sky. This is interesting. As I mentioned earlier, there are people waiting outside, grabbing foreigners, telling them that they can do a 45-minute to 1 hour tour for 600 baht. And inside the temple, they are giving tours in English that last 45 minutes to 1 hour, and they're completely free. So there's no need to get the services of one of those people outside. You can do it for free once you're inside. The advantage of having a guide is that they can tell you things that aren't obviously apparent. And you walk past this building, yeah, it's very attractive, but you don't know what's inside. And she's just told us that it's actually a library, and inside are books on Buddhist scripture. Here, one of the golden statues is undergoing renovation by 3 Thai artisans. Tam setกี่วันครับ
3 วันค่ะ
3 วัน. Okay. It's going to take 3 days to do this. This is a bell tower, and apparently its only function is to summon the supreme patriarch of the Buddhist religion in Thailand. And I usually refer to this whole complex as the Grand Palace, but what we're in now is actually a temple. This is Wat Pragao, and now we're going into the Grand Palace. If you go into the Grand Palace, you can't come back into the temple. So we'll go and see the Grand Palace and end our tour. And I said earlier that these murals depict the life of the Buddha, but that's not true. It's actually the story of the Ramayana, sort of an epic story that originally came from India. We've just exited the temple of the Emerald Buddha, and now we're in the Grand Palace area. And once again, there is another absolutely spectacular building. It really is beautiful. The architectural style and the gardens are simply wonderful.
My dream house.
My daughter's just told me it's her dream house, but somehow I don't think she'll ever live in a house like this.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, absolutely fantastic.
Where are you going there?
I have to admit that most of Thailand is a real mess, but it's certainly not because of lack of skill or talent. If the Thais put their mind to it, they can compete with anyone. I'm not sure of the history behind this building. There's certainly some European architectural influence. It looks a bit French, a bit chateau-like, so I guess the French were involved. I'll have to look up some more when I get home. When you're single, you can afford to be very selfish. When I was single and came to Bangkok, I just used to like going to the temples, the old buildings, the historic districts, and seeking out good food. When I come with my wife, we have to go to all the shopping malls, and now that my daughter's getting a bit older, we have to go to all the K-pop and sticker shops. So that's where we are at the moment while she's choosing some stickers. This is a novel experience for me. We're on the way back to the hotel from Siam Paragon. I had to go there to go to a toy shop to get something for my son, otherwise there'll be hell to play when I go home. And we're actually in a London taxi, in a sort of like black cab. And I've never been in one of these in Bangkok. And even when I was living in the UK, I very rarely went in London cabs because they're so expensive. I always used to travel around London by tube or buses. So it's a really strange experience. It's very comfortable in the back, lots of room, lots of headroom, very clean, and the price is just the same as a regular yellow and green Bangkok taxi, so no more expensive. On this trip, I've seen more Porsches than I've seen in 18 years living in Hat Yai. I still hear foreigners saying what a poor country Thailand is. In fact, it's a very rich country with a lot of poor people. There are some massively wealthy people in Thailand, and it seems that most of those rich people live in Bangkok. I believe that these days these vehicles are made in China, including the ones in London. And in London they will be black, in Bangkok they're actually blue. And I doubt very much that the driver here has spent 5 years doing the knowledge to get a license. So a bit of a different situation in Thailand. The journey I've just done cost me 80 baht. I gave the guy a 20 baht tip, so 100 baht. And I haven't used the London cab for many years, but I'm guessing that if I'd done a journey of the similar distance in London, it would have cost me the equivalent of about 1,000 baht. So very cheap here. This trip is quite nostalgic for me. I've been coming to Bangkok for several years and I've stayed in many different parts of the city. And the only place I don't really like is Sukhumvit. And we're in the Silom area now. And this, what looks like an abandoned derelict hotel, is the very first hotel I stayed in Thailand. That was in 1987, 34 years ago. And back then it was called the Menorah. And it looks like it's had a name change. It's called the Ma Hotel now, and probably a change of management. And it doesn't look as if anyone has stayed here for years. It's really in an awful condition. So that's a bit sad to see, but it does bring back a lot of memories. I can't find the words to describe that 1987 trip to Thailand. By that time, I'd already visited the States and Canada, and I've been to places like the Greek islands and quite a few different parts of Europe where Brits normally go for their vacations. But that first trip to Thailand was just mind-blowing. At the time, not many people went to Thailand. It was known as a frontier destination. You couldn't just go to your high street travel agent and arrange a trip. I had to find a special travel agent who dealt with Thailand. And I think in 1987 there were 3 million tourists in Thailand. But most of those would have been Malaysians and Singaporeans just crossing the southern border. And there were very, very few Farangs. And I just never experienced anything like it. And I think actually that trip set the course for the rest of my life. After that trip, I couldn't get Thailand out of my system. I came for several more vacations. The last vacation was in 2002. And then finally I moved permanently to Thailand to live in 2003. And being in this area of Thailand, seeing the old hotel, seeing these familiar streets has brought back a lot of really good memories. It's a long time ago. I seem to remember we spent 4 nights in the Menorah in Bangkok, which was a great experience. And the friend I was travelling with was the sort of backpacker type, and he was really insistent on going down to Koh Samui. And Samui back then was also a very different place. There was no electricity on the islands, no airport, it was just coconut trees. So we flew down to Surat Thani and then got the boat across to Samui, and it was okay, but it was just boring. There was just nothing to do, and I really got bored, so it pressed him to move on somewhere else. So we came back to Bangkok and then went to Pattaya, and that again was an incredible experience. Pattaya back then was a lot more innocent. Again, it was completely different to how it is today, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And that 1987 trip will just never be repeated. This is another area of Bangkok where I haven't been for a long time. This is the infamous Papong District, and back on that first trip to Bangkok in 1987, I remember spending quite a lot of time here. It's just, let's have a look around, not expecting to see much. All pretty quiet. There's quite a lot of street food around here, and I know that some Farangs go crazy about Thai street food. It's okay, I can eat it, but it's not my preference. Some jackfruit here. The jackfruit itself is huge, and they just get these little segments off. Blue cake, banana cake. Grilled pork. This one looks like som tam. And so ends my November 2021 trip to Bangkok. Arriving in Bangkok always excites me, but after a couple of days I'm ready to leave, and 4 days is about the most I can tolerate. There's lots to do and see, great shopping, great food, but the city is an assault on my senses. It's frenetic, and at my stage of life I prefer more peaceful surroundings. I always get through a lot of money very quickly in Bangkok, and, just like every other big city in the world, I never find Bangkok that friendly. Thais will answer questions, but interactions are brief, very businesslike, and there aren't many of those famous Thai smiles. If you have any comments, questions or other feedback, please leave them below. Thanks for watching, and more videos soon.